Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive Lab. This week we have a really exciting guest. We have Luke Brodie. Luke currently co leads the Client Innovation Services team at Accenture's Canada Innovation Hub, where they focus on early stage innovation opportunities with clients. He's also had a meandering career path that has included being a flight attendant, a musician, and a lecturer. He's traveled extensively over his life and career, which has helped him develop empathy in design work that he does. He likes languages and loves to learn a few phrases in the languages of the places he visits. Thank you for joining us here in the show today.
Jacinta, it is I who thank you. I'm so excited to speak with you.
Absolutely. I need to ask you, though, what are the languages you can speak and what are the phrases you can share with us?
I grew up in Montreal, so I grew up speaking French and English.
Hmm.
I lived in Mexico for 5 years, so I speak Spanish
Wow.
fluently. I've been grateful to travel to Brazil and Portugal several times, and I have
Wow.
picked up a bit of Portuguese and took some classes, so my Portuguese is conversational. And other than that, just something ridiculous. For example, in Hindi, I can say, "I need a lemon. It's really important." Just stuff that you could start a conversation with, like, "Why are you asking me for a lemon?" Just
Yeah.
fun stuff.
Oh my God, that's awesome. Could you share what is I need a lemon in Hindi?
Yeah, "Muche nimbu chahiye, bahut zaruri hai."
Even the accent's amazing.
I don't know how my pronunciation is, but when I say it, people understand.
That's so awesome. That's so awesome. So today we will speak about innovation, the process to innovate. Before that, curious to hear about your story though. So, because you were a flight attendant, you were a musician, I think you released a few records, all that. How did you end up pivoting and ending up to where you are today?
The short answer, I'll give you the long answer, but the short answer is I was able to identify and leverage transferable skills throughout my career journey. I started, as you mentioned, as a flight attendant when I was 19, and most of my friends were looking at university. I thought, I don't like university. I don't want to go to university. What can I do with the skills I have now? And I had been working at a store in the mall. I obviously grew up in Montreal, so was bilingual at that time, and thought, okay, service experience, languages, what can I do? And something was in the newspaper. I'm older than I'd like to think I look, so yes, it was a newspaper ad about being a flight attendant. And I thought, oh, I have these skills. Let's give it a try. And I had wanted to travel. I hadn't traveled much by that point, and I applied and I ended up getting the job. And I spent a long time in the airline industry. I was a flight attendant, I was a flight director, I did a brief stint in management, and I spent my last 5 years there in the training department. And that's when I knew I had found a calling. I love facilitation. I love standing at the room full of people and helping them learn things and apply these new skills. So I just loved that. And I did other things on the side because one of the greatest benefits of an airline schedule is its flexibility. So I did eventually go to school. I started my undergrad when I was about 25, and I did an undergrad in business slowly, like part time, some online, some in person. And it took me a long time to finish it, and that's okay because I was living life on the side, flying. And I also took a 5 year hiatus from life in Canada where I moved to Mexico City, and that's where I was a professional musician. I had always played music on the side in Canada and thought, hey, I like music. I want to live in Mexico. Why don't I combine these things? So I did an acoustic solo project in Spanish because I had learned Spanish by this point.
Wow.
In Spanish, I moved to Mexico. I didn't know anyone. I had recorded a demo, and I would just go up to people on the street and say, hey, my name's Luke. I sing in Spanish. Will you buy my demo for 10 pesos? And I learned so much about relationship building, about sales. I managed all the business elements of my musical career. And I mean, I eventually worked with a label, but it was mostly as an independent musician there. I ended up releasing two full length albums in Spanish and did
Crazy.
MTV and magazines and made exactly zero
Wow.
pesos, which is a little less than $0 depending on the exchange rate. But I have a lot of stories to tell about my time there. I moved back to Canada, and that's when I decided to get my career back on track because I had hit my goals with music and I was ready for something new. And that's when I moved back to Canada and got into the training department at the airline. So I was able to hang on to my job the whole time and basically commuted
Hmm.
between Toronto and Mexico City because I could do so for free. It's
Hmm.
ridiculous, but it worked.
Hmm.
Um, and I got back, worked in the training department, hit a wall for professional growth there, and all the jobs that I was looking at outside the airline that I was interested in said we would prefer you to have a master's degree. So I went and did an MBA. Right after my MBA, I was hired at an experiential learning company called Experience Point, and we did two things. We did organizational change and we did design thinking. And we went deep on those two areas. And we were using experiential workshops to teach these skills and to help people apply them in their jobs. It was so much fun. I have only good things to say about my time there, the people, the reasons behind the work, our clients, and there was a lot of travel involved. Every week I was in a different city,
Mhm.
mostly the States, but it was a global role. So like Taiwan, Belgium, Brazil, wherever. And at one point I was leaving on an overnight flight and my child, who was about 3 at the time, came and said, "Daddy, when you take the airplane, I feel sad." And I said, "Oh my gosh, I
Oh.
need to do something else." Because I was so happy with what I was doing, I was quite slow and intentional about my job search and looked out in the market to see where I could transfer these skills. So I like learned to identify and transfer these skills. And it was right around the time that Accenture was opening the Canada Innovation Hub,
Mm.
and they were hiring designers. So I reached out and had a few conversations with some different organizations, but it really clicked with Accenture, and it was exciting to get in at the beginning of the Canada Innovation Hub. I joined about 6 months after the team was formed, and now I've been here for almost 4 years and I'm having a great time here. My role has evolved a little bit, and the so I started leading projects and then like leading small teams, and now with a partner, I lead the Canada wide client innovation services team. And I promise I'm almost done talking, Jacinta. I don't know if people
Love
will
the
see the video,
story.
like my running names. I'm like, oh, do you want to stop talking? So I like to describe my role as being a shaker of snow globes, like the travel
Ooh.
souvenir. And my job is to find the right pieces to bring inside this snow globe. And sometimes it's an expert from Accenture in some kind of industry or technology. It's always a client, it's someone with an expertise in a methodology such as design thinking, which is what I use a lot in my work. And then once we pull all these pieces in, we shake it up, and it's chaotic at first because these are all the pieces floating around, and it's us examining the challenge from different perspectives. But then patterns start to form, and that's thanks to us intentionally applying human centered design and creativity to this problem solving. And then as these snowflakes fall, we have solved these challenges differently, creatively, innovatively. And then our team would hand it off to another team. As you mentioned in the introduction, our team specializes in early stage innovation, and we work to support teams that will then go and implement. So there
Mhm.
you go. And like, what? How long did that take me? Like 7 minutes? Yeah, there's my story, Jacinta.
Perfect. Love the story. So many things to even like jump on.
Oh, I
Would
also teach. Sorry, I
Oh,
forgot. I
yes, of
teach
course. You're a
university. I
lecturer.
teach design management at Toronto Metropolitan University.
Oh my
Just on the side, like one class per year. Like, I love it.
Amazing. A person with lots of passion. I love it. I was going to go into design thinking later on. Before
Mhm,
that, I want to define innovation. So, in your
mhm.
words, how do you define innovation?
Ooh, I think about this a lot, and there are some textbook definitions that resonate with me. I think Accenture defines it well. We say innovation is doing things in a new way that adds value. You've got novelty and value combined there. I'm a fan of the work of IDEO, and one definition that I've heard from IDEO is that innovation means meeting previously unmet human need. So you've got a component of like human centricity there. And another definition I like comes from a guy called David Robertson, and he's a professor at MIT. He wrote a book called The Power of Little Ideas, and in that book, he defines innovation as a new match between a need and a solution that creates value. So if
Mm.
I take all of those and put those in a snow globe and shake them up, I get my own definition, which is that innovation is what happens at the intersection of novelty, value, and scale. And you need these three ingredients for something to be innovative, in my opinion. If it's just new, but it doesn't solve a problem for anyone and you can't scale it, well, maybe it's creative, maybe it's new, but it's not innovative. And if you can scale it, but it's just like I don't know, like a cheaper way to make a t-shirt or something, like, and it's not new and it's not valuable, then it's not innovative. So it's intersection comes at the intersection of novelty, value, and scale, often under a lens of creativity, because there's, in my experience, a lot of creativity involved when doing innovative work, and always under a lens of human centricity. Like, for whom are we creating this value? We need to know who our user groups are and what we're doing that benefits them. So that's my definition.
Perfect. And to innovate, you mentioned design thinking. Can we
Mhm.
define that as well from your end?
Yeah, the design thinking can, in my experience anyway, can be looked at so many different ways, and it can be a model, like a methodology for problem solving. We can take some of the methods of from design thinking and apply them, like just plug them in where they make sense. But generally, design thinking is a problem solving methodology that allows anyone to apply the tools that designers use when they solve problems. It's a way of democratizing design. It doesn't turn people into designers necessarily, but it allows anyone to use the tools of design to solve problems. It is best applied to problems that are complex, ambiguous, and have human behavior at the core. And sometimes when organizations learn about a method like design thinking, they say, we're going to apply it to everything, like a hammer looking for a nail, and it just won't work. And they're going to say, oh yeah, we tried that design thinking, it doesn't work. You have to know when to use it and when not to use it. And you want to use it when you have something that's complex, ambiguous, with human behavior at the core. It can be applied to products, services, systems, strategies, as long as it meets those three things. And there are so many different models. Like at Accenture, we have a model. Stanford B School has a model. Like if you look up design thinking models, there are countless models, and they all say basically the same thing with different words. The beginning, we're anchored in the current state. We're defining our challenge. We're empathizing with our users. We use that new understanding to generate insights and opportunities that we will develop ideas that might work, might not work. We take those ideas and intentionally select the ones that we want to prototype and test and learn. And then we go out and we test, we learn, we iterate. And then that's when we could start to scale something. So
Could,
that's design thinking for me.
right. Could you share some example or like an example of where design thinking works and when it doesn't? You mentioned the three things like complex, ambiguous, and human centered. So,
Mhm. Yeah, a simple example of when we might not use it is when it might be obvious to use a different method. For example, let's say you work in manufacturing and somebody that runs a plant says, we need to make this assembly line run 10% faster. Use like something like Lean Six Sigma. There is a method for process improvement. There are many methods for process improvement. Or if you work in academia and you're looking at hypotheses that you want to see if they can be disproven, you could use the scientific method. Like that's what that's for. It's for proving or disproving hypotheses. And if you have a product or a service, I can give you an example from work perhaps that we had a client that came and said, we need to digitize one of the services that we provide these like few million people that interact with us every year. And our team came back and said, hang on, if we're going to approach this through design thinking, digitizing a service is a solution. What is the problem that we're solving?
mm,
So we start reframing this, looking at it through the lens of the people they serve, and we help them realize that it's not just the end users of their service that they provide. They have call center employees that can be a user group that are greatly affected by digitizing service, and then like other stakeholder groups. So we help them see their challenge through different perspectives and evolve from digitizing a service to modernizing a service, because their call center wasn't going away. The other stakeholder groups that they interacted with like would see different benefits and drawbacks to just digitization. So we helped them modernize, and we conducted interviews with all kinds of different users. Like we could talk later about extreme users, analogous users, the types of places we look for empathy and inspiration early in a design project. And And then we held a series of workshops with them. We use a lot of workshops as tools, like co-creative tools in design thinking processes, which sometimes leads people to believe that design thinking and co-creation are synonymous. And if we're having a workshop, we're doing design thinking. We're not necessarily doing design thinking when we have a workshop.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a tool. I've also done design thinking projects that did not have workshops. That you don't need a workshop. But we did in this one hold, I think, 3 workshops with our clients and different stakeholder groups, like all together. And of those 3 workshops, 2 of them were focused just on developing a deeper understanding of the current state. And we used that deeper understanding of the current state to as a platform to build ideas off of in the 3rd workshop. And because they had that shared understanding, and it's always fun to work with a group of executives who think they're on the same page and we know they're not. We put them through some activities and they're like, oh my gosh, you think it's this, I think it's this. And we just help them get together and be like, okay, yes, we agree, this is the problem to solve, here are some ideas. So they generated ideas. We helped them choose the criteria they could use to select them. And then they went and tested them. And that's like, in the context of my work, that's where my team's involvement mostly ended. It was somebody else that took it on after that.
Mm.
Does that hit the mark, Jacinta, for like an example?
Absolutely. Yeah. I have so many points that I wanted to catch on. A comment though, I love how you mentioned the client came in saying, this is what I want. I want you to digitize the
Mhm.
process. But actually, they come in sometimes not with the problem, but with a solution in mind. So I love how you stepped
Totally.
back and you're like, no, 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 what's the problem? This happens everywhere in every workforce. So that was just a comment that I was going to make actually.
I have a formula you can use to do this, actually, if it's
Hmm.
helpful. And anytime somebody has an idea, like for a solution, we can take one step back and say, okay, we need like to fill in the blanks with a mad lib of sorts to make a how might we question, like a starting point for many design challenges. And you need a user group and a benefit to that user group. And the mad lib goes like this: how might we help user group do benefit? And we can take some liberties with this language, but we really need to identify the user group that we're solving for and the benefit to that user group. And it's not like, how might we help our company sell more stuff? Like, that's self-serving. How might we should look at the users for whom we are solving and the benefit to them.
Mm. Hmm. 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 That is so great. Yeah, I don't think we actually even know about all of this stuff. So this is just gold nuggets everywhere. Um Before I go into my other little rabbit holes, what are your steps in design thinking? So you mentioned like empathy,
Mhm.
testing, all of this stuff. How do you frame that?
Okay, this is like Luke's model in his head. This isn't like from a textbook, but it's informed by like textbook
Hmm.
learning and application. Step one: define the challenge. Like, what is our overarching? How might we question? Then we'll look at that user group that we're serving, and we will determine who we can interact with and observe and interview. We'll determine what methods we're going to use, not only there but throughout. And we'll identify extreme users, we'll identify analogous users, and we'll make an interview plan or observation plan. We'll get out there and we'll interact with people. And this step, when doing design thinking, in my opinion, is non-negotiable. If an organization says, oh, we've got all kinds of survey data, and like we need the survey data to help us identify the users that we'll interact with, because there are a lot of intersections between design and data. Like, we need the data, but we really need, in doing design thinking, to interact with end
Hmm.
users. For me, the most common method is stakeholder interviews, and we pose questions in ways that help us do 2 things: empathize and become inspired by asking them for stories and then follow-ups that help us uncover the emotions that drive their behavior. And after we've interacted with people and collected a robust, objective, qualitative fact base, these are our observations, then we move on to the interpretation stage, where we develop insights, which I define as a new understanding of a behavior or a phenomenon. Like, so we have to, the way I heard a colleague say it once: we collect the dots before we connect the
Mm.
dots. We collect all the observations and then we start like making sense of them. And this is so that we can avoid confirmation bias. It's part of organizational behavior theory. The earlier we start to form opinions, we might unconsciously ignore subsequent observations that don't uphold our initial opinions. So we've got our insights. These insights point to opportunities that are usually more focused questions that instead of answering with more questions, now we can answer them with ideas. So we would hold some ideation sessions, different ways to do this. One of my personal favorites is like a group brainstorm. So we would have some ideation, down select which ideas we're going to prototype. And by prototype, I mean the first iterations of this are literally done in like 5 minutes. With like, it's, you could draw a storyboard if it's a service or a system. You could make a physical prototype with plasticine and pipe cleaners, or just something to put in someone's hands to get some feedback. And then you do that. You go, you interact with your users, and you get some feedback, and then you just come back and iterate and iterate. You run experiments first to learn, then you run experiments to evolve, and then you run experiments to validate. Validation comes at the very end.
Hmm. How much time do you spend in each stage?
I work in consulting. You know what the consultant's answer to this
Mhm.
is, Jacinta? It
Of
depends.
course.
It depends so much. Um, like it depends. If we had unlimited resources and we could create an ideal project, most of the time would be spent up
Mhm.
front, and most of the time would be spent defining the problem and really developing a deep understanding of it. And the shortest amount of time would be spent developing ideas. That's so easy. Like you can bring together people together and have a brainstorm or use another technique. When I like, it's called crazy eights, like all these different ways. That's so easy and
Mhm.
fast. And you can do that and then see, do we have something to test? No, you can take a step back. And although I've described the design thinking process as being linear, it's important to note that it is not always linear. In fact, it's often not linear. We'll get to a point and then we'll realize we have to take a step back. Then we'll like figure out something out for us for a later step. So there's a lot of back and forth. One of the biggest criticisms in literature of design thinking is that it is presented in a linear way, and it doesn't work. And I agree. It doesn't work if you just try and force it linearly. So we have to be flexible with that. The most time is spent understanding the
Mhm.
challenge, and then we spend a little bit of time ideating, and then we would spend time in the design thinking process testing to learn. And then obviously when you hand it off and somebody's going to go implement and scale, that would take a long time. But I hope I can't, it's hard for me to give you a
Yeah.
concrete answer like in days or weeks. Like I don't know, did I answer
Abs
your question? I go on tangents sometimes.
Absolutely. No, that's really good. I was gonna now ask like 3 other questions. Um, because you deal with different people, different departments, different clients, and there's a lot of creativity, which means subjectivity as well. How do you align perspectives, not only within the team when you're figuring out what solution to go for, but also aligning it with your clients?
With great difficulty. It's hard. It's so hard to do this. Like on the team, outside the team, like if it were easy, everyone
Mhm.
would do it. How do we align? I like to show people instead of telling
Mhm.
people. So I can show you something right now that I don't know if this is going to be put out on video, but like everyone just like imagine like what we're doing and try and do this in your heads. So that if you're able, just like raise your hand
Yeah.
and point at the
Mhm.
ceiling, please. Make clockwise
Mhm.
circles, like these
Mhm.
small
Mhm.
clockwise circles. Look up at your finger. What way are those circles going?
Oh, wait. The oth
They're going clockwise. Well, if they're not going clockwise,
Yes,
make them go
yes,
clockwise.
yes.
Make
Got
them.
it.
It's
Got
like,
it.
what way are
Got
those
it.
circles going?
To yeah, clockwise. Yeah.
Clockwise, right? Okay, now keep them going the same way. Do not change your hand. Now bend your
Uh-huh.
elbow and bring your finger down
Yeah.
below your eyes,
Oh,
like this. Look down at it. What way are those circles
the
going?
other way.
Did you
No.
change? I said not to
No.
change. Huh. What changed? What changed, Jacinta?
Perspective.
Your
Yep.
perspective.
Mhm. Mhm.
Exactly. So is it clockwise? Is it counterclockwise? It's both, depending on how you look at it.
Mhm.
And I like to have examples like
Mm.
this and quick activities in my back pocket. Because when somebody's like, "Ah, this doesn't work," and I show them something like this, instead of telling them, they're like, "Oh yeah, I guess there are different ways to
Love
look at
that.
this." There are, and so we show, don't tell. There are all these design adages, and one of them that I like
Mhm.
is show, don't tell.
Love that.
So I can go, here I am telling you all these things. I'm like, show, don't tell. But I can go and I can tell them all these things. When I can show
Mm.
them something, that helps. And when I can show them what they're going to
Mhm.
get out of it. And like at different stages, and we can say, hey, if we follow this model properly at this stage, you're going to get insights that you wouldn't get otherwise. And part of the benefit of bringing in an external team to do this, like for our clients, for example, part of the benefit of having like a team like the one I lead do the interviews is that we have the license to ask the questions that they might not be able to ask or might not feel comfortable asking because of their deep expertise. We have the benefit of a beginner's mind when we go in. Obviously, we do our research on the client's industry
Mm-hmm.
and context, but we have the benefit of a beginner's mind, and we can ask things from a point of genuine curiosity, and we learn unexpected things. And when we go back and we present the insights to our clients, they are all like, I'm always worried. I'm like, oh, is this going to work? Is this going to work? It always works. And they're always like, how did you learn this? Like we try with our surveys, or how did you learn this? It's like, well, we carefully curate our interview
Mm-hmm.
questions so that we can come up with this new understanding to help you. And it's amazing. Some of our
Mm-hmm.
projects are just that. Like, we don't always go end to end. Some of our projects are just like, hey, like, help us with some insights, and we can do like
Mm-hmm.
research projects.
What do you think are the biggest challenges with design thinking? Like, obviously, we've mentioned all the great things, creativity, all these stuff. What are the challenges?
Hmm. There are lots of challenges, and I think sometimes I suffer from impatience and I
Mm-hmm.
just want to go fast. And I need to remind myself we have to do it right. Like we have to do it properly. So sometimes I have to like slow myself down a little bit, because when we go and do the initial stages intentionally, we ultimately end up going
Mm-hmm.
further faster. But we have to do the first stages right. It's so important. Some other challenges are when a team wants to use design thinking because they've heard of it, and then we come in and we say, like, this is not the right methodology for you. Like, for example, if a team wants to figure out future trends, there's a whole discipline called strategic
Mm-hmm.
foresight that has maybe some similar activities or tools as design thinking, but this is like trend projection and preparing for future. And if you try and do design thinking when you want to do that kind of work, well, you're going to be disappointed. So one challenge is making sure you're using it to solve the right problems. And another challenge is when sometimes people perceive this to be a new fad, flash in the pan. Oh yeah, I've like participated in a half day learning session, so I'm going to go run projects. It's important to know that there are people who like devote their life studies to these methods. Like, you can do master's degrees in this, like, and you need a team. Like, you want all kinds of different people on a team, but you need somebody leading the work that really
Mm-hmm.
knows what they're doing and can lead other teams
Mm-hmm.
through it. So those are some of the
Right, right.
challenges.
Are there, on the other hand, are there tech tools that you use to help stimulate creativity? So I'll give an example from mine, like ChatGPT.
Mhm.
I I use it as a creative collaborator, then a truth fact checker.
Mhm.
So if I'm stuck in a rut, I'm like, okay, just put in
Mhm.
dot points, and then they come up with like things. I'm like, oh, of course. Anything from your end?
Yeah. I
Hmm.
love ChatGPT. You got to be careful with
Absolutely,
fact checking though, because sometimes it gets
exactly.
things wrong. It makes things up. So you got to check ChatGPT.
Hmm.
ChatGPT is amazing. I actually told my students in my class this semester, I expect you to use ChatGPT. There's a professor at University of Pennsylvania called Ethan Mollick, and he posted on LinkedIn the text that he now puts in his course outlines
Hmm.
about ChatGPT. Like, and I basically said that to my students. I expect you to use this, and I expect you to cite it. I expect you to say what your search queries were, because it's an amazing tool. And ChatGPT, I said, but don't use it to write your whole essay, because ChatGPT just came out with an assignment
Yep.
checking tool of their own,
Yep.
or OpenAI did actually. So, and I've got all these assignments that were due last night, so I'm gonna check it out and see how that goes. So I like ChatGPT. I haven't used it for creative
Mm-hmm.
collaboration per se, but um, like one workshop activity that I like to do. It's not a design thinking activity, but it's just something that I like to do to fill time in workshops when people are coming into a room, or during breaks. I create multiple
Mm-hmm.
choice quizzes, like when you go to the movies before the movie starts, and I just have them rolling about the client's business, about the context that we're working on, and I just play them. And it used to be I would have to ask somebody on the team, can you please go and write 50 questions about I don't know,
Mhm.
like about podcasts, whatever it is. And they would have to do research. But now I just ask ChatGPT, please write 50 multiple choice questions about podcasts and highlight the correct answer.
Mhm.
Done. So easy. But tech tools. Here's one that I like. It's called
Mhm.
Mural. This is their old logo, but Mural is a digital whiteboard. There are similar tools like Miro is another one, but I use a lot of Mural because it facilitates virtual collaboration so well. And even sometimes when we're in a room, we will have everyone on their computer
Mm.
on Mural and working on a digital whiteboard. But that's another tool that I like to use. Other than that, it's a lot of like setting up rooms and making sure that it's not really the tools, but it's the structure of the activities that we're planning. If we're
Mhm.
planning a workshop, that they flow nicely from one to the next, that the connection points make sense, and that we are structuring the time to get the
Mhm.
required outputs.
Before I go into innovation as a whole, kind of have like a last question about design thinking. I'm really curious to hear what you think though. So, we spoke about using design thinking at work. What about in your practical life? So,
Mhm.
right now, I don't think you can see, and listeners can't see, but behind me, I have a board right there. So I divided into four quadrants. Is basically my life. There's career, there's love,
Mhm.
there's play, and there's health. And I sort of use it as like a self-diagnostic tool to see, oh, okay, where am I in this, part or this part? And now I kind of use it as like a manifestation
Yeah.
board of like, okay, this is, I want to put this in. I have podcaster in as well in my career part. So I I
Love it.
see that like it's absolutely revolutionary. I think it was a book
Mhm.
called Designing Your Life, which is like basically like a design thinker, but for your life.
Mhm.
Do you
Yep.
have certain
Yep.
stories or applications like that that has affected your personal life?
It would make sense if I did, but I don't
Oh.
really. I it would totally make sense if I did. I think so. So in some ways I do.
Hmm.
I can give you some examples. um, but not as an end-to-end process as it is in designing your life. When you said the four categories, I'm like, either you've read Designing Your Life or you need
Yeah.
to. For those that have it, it's a book by a
Hmm.
couple of Stanford professors, and it takes the whole design thinking process and you can apply it to your life. They've released a follow-up called Designing
Oh.
Your Work Life. So I haven't read that one.
Yeah.
I've read Designing Your Life, and I heard an interview with them on another podcast, and I can't remember which one because I want to go back and listen to it again. So if you know which one it is,
I will.
Jacinta, tell me, tell me. Um, and and I so one example is I do woodworking
Ooh.
as a hobby, and I approach this with a beginner's mind. My dad has been doing woodworking as a hobby for like a long time, like probably since before I was born. And I come to this and say it's like so more specifically, I do wood turning. You need a machine called a lathe, and the wood spins around, and you use
Oh, okay.
chisels to
Hmm.
to shape the wood. So I make pens and
Wow.
bowls and other round things. Like I can
Oh.
show you like
Oh. That's so
this
nice.
pen
How long did that take?
bowl. I don't know, like an hour or so. Like it's not that long 'cause it goes
Amazing.
pretty fast. And like I mean, there are efficiencies once you get good at it. But I told my dad like I want to like take light colored wood and
Hmm.
like dye it. How do we do this? And he's like, "We'll just go to Home Depot and buy like wood stain." And I did. I'm like, "This doesn't work. There's got to be another way. Like, how are we gonna do this?" So I was making a pen
Hmm.
and I took a highlighter and I just like ran the highlighter along it while it was spinning around, and it totally worked. And I ended up with a pink pen. Perfect. Like that's exactly what I was going for. And then I said, "What else can I do?" So here's a rolling pin that I made, and I so
Ooh.
it's all blue, right? But I dyed it with food coloring. So
Oh.
this was
Right.
a prototype. So it's food
Yeah.
soup. It's a rolling pin, and I said, "What can I try?" So I diluted food coloring, and like it spins around, and I do it, and I learned a lot. Like you can't use this
Hmm.
because the food coloring will come
Hmm.
out, and I learned this now. My hands were so blue after I made this thing, but I learned. So trying, like building to think and testing to learn. These are the types of
Hmm.
small things I apply to my life, but I have read Designing Your Life, and I did do the exercises, but it's not something
Mm.
I regularly do. Like I have friends at work who will plan their family vacations with
Wow.
post-it notes on the wall.
Wow.
I'm not. I'm not that.
That's incredible. I mean, I love the blue, like, that's so neat, though. How does it not transfer on your hand now?
It does. Well, I mean, I've wiped it enough times,
Yeah.
like with wet cloths, just to try and get. And if I wiped it again with a wet cloth, it would turn blue, like again. So, I mean,
Yep, yep, yep.
this is
Good
how
to
I
know. Good to
learn.
know. Okay. So moving on to just innovation as a whole, what are the current innovation trends that
Mhm.
you see now that is worth mentioning?
Current trends that I see now. ChatGPT is one. There are a lot of, because we work with a lot of cutting edge technology at Accenture. I'm so grateful to like get a glimpse into all of these cool things that are like coming out. For example,
Mm,
metaverse
hmm.
technologies is really cool, and people are still trying to
Yeah.
figure out what to do with this. So in some like I if you haven't read Accenture's thought leadership on metaverse, go and check this out because there are so many cool opportunities with these technologies. And there are a lot of organizations that are still like trying to figure out, it's almost like a hammer looking for a
Hmm.
nail. What can we do with this? And so innovation, I wouldn't say that's like design thinking related because we already have the answer, and the answer is metaverse. And it's not just VR, right? Like metaverse is a continuum. And yeah, so that is cool. What else? I don't know. I don't have a good
Yeah.
answer for you for that
Yeah.
one.
I
So
mean, could you
come
share
back to
some
me on that.
applications of metaverse? For ChatGPT and AI, I actually have a separate
Mhm.
episode fully on AI and ChatGPT. So we've got that
Okay,
covered. For
cool.
metaverse, though, not
Okay,
at
good.
all. So, yeah, what are the certain applications that you can see that we can use?
So one application of VR technologies, and like VR is like anything that you're in a headset, but metaverse would be like this headset connected to a network that you can interact with people. And there are cool applications for training, anything from leadership skills and conversation simulation, um, or like more like imagine you have
Hmm.
safety training to do. Like you could put this on and like be in some kind of
Hmm.
operational environment that you could do some kind of training. So I think training, maybe I think about training because
Yeah.
I used to work in training, but that is one cool potential use case. And I don't know, I'm planning a summer holiday now, and I think it would be kind of cool if I'm
Yeah.
like deciding between two destinations, if I could like look
I
around
would
them. I
love
don't know
that.
if
I
that
think they
exists
actually
yet,
already
but
have it right now in Singapore. Yeah, but that's like super.
oh,
It's
probably.
really expensive though, but it's almost probably equivalent to your trip. But
Yeah, probably. And now all of your listeners who are like so advanced in metaverse are like, who is this guy talking about metaverse? He doesn't know what he's talking about. And they're right. I don't know what I'm talking about. We have a lot of
don't worry, we
experts in
have
metaverse, and
lots
I'm
of
not one of
other tech experts too to jump in. So no worries, no
them.
problem. On the idea of innovation though, so we talked about a lot of tech and stuff. What are your thoughts on resources? So, do you think that to innovate, it would be better if you curb resources or free resources?
And
So, it could be
define
time,
resources,
it could
please.
be money. I think
Mhm.
those are, or like any form of
Cool.
help, training.
Mhm. Okay. I think it can go both ways. And here's my
Hmm.
consultant answer again. It depends. There's a researcher called David Burkus, and he has listed the 10 myths of creativity. And one of these myths is called the constraint myth. And it is a myth that having constraints inhibits creativity because having constraints can, in
Yeah.
fact, promote creativity. But then, so like, for example, you have to solve a problem and you have to do it with a constraint of time, well, you're going to think creatively about how to do it. And I can give you an example from my work. When I was a flight attendant, we had to use creativity all the time. Were we innovative? Were we doing design thinking?
Hmm.
Probably not, but we were being creative because we like that. It's a unique workplace in that at the end of your shift, your
Hmm.
workplace ends. Like the plane lands and you can't stay after. Like you have to finish your work in the
Hmm.
time that the plane is in the air, like before it even comes in for an approach. So we had to think creatively, and we had to do all kinds of like calculations, like do we have time to do this or do that. And when I was flying, I could make you a cappuccino on board,
Hmm.
like with what we had. And now I know I can get one of those things on
Yeah.
Amazon and like froth the milk, but we didn't have that. So here's what we had: we had instant coffee, we had milk, and we had water boilers. And like, so what we would do is we would take like a club soda can and rinse it out and put milk in it. We would take the metal pot from the water boiler and put boiling water and heat the milk by putting that club soda can
Wow.
with milk like in the
Okay.
hot water, and it would heat the milk. Then we would take an empty water bottle and just put a little bit of milk and shake it up so it would be frothy. We would
Oh my.
make a coffee. It wasn't great coffee. We would make a coffee, and then we would pour that milk on top of it, like from the hot water bottle. And then like we had hot chocolate, so we would just like sprinkle
Oh.
a little bit on top. So it was like this. So the constraints that we had catalyzed our creativity in
Hmm.
doing something like that. So to come back to your question, do we
Yeah.
need resources? It's always a help when you have like great people, great tools, great spaces, when you have time, when you have money, and it is a help. I don't think it's 100% required, because you see some of the most innovative ideas coming from situations where
Exactly.
resources are
I was
constrained.
gonna point because for me personally, I've always thought, no, I need a lot of time. I need money. I need all of this to make it happen.
Mhm.
But very easy example, like case competitions, right? So
Mhm.
I've joined a few, and we have 2 weeks,
Yeah,
and the amount of creativity that
yeah,
pops up out of there, like, is insane. There's, I think, even 6 hour
yep.
case comms, right, where
Oh,
people are just
totally.
literally just locked in a room for 6 hours
Yeah.
with no phone, just water, and the ideas that come out of that is insane.
Yep. It's amazing, and I think we can create those conditions. Like we can simulate that those constraints, and we do a lot when we're doing workshops. For example, we'll say
Mhm.
generate
Mhm.
ideas. You've got 10 minutes. Go, and they're like, what? And they force themselves to like generate these ideas. Can we do another 10 minutes? Sure, but will you get better ideas if you do 20 minutes instead of 10? If you do 2 days instead of ten
Mhm.
minutes? Not necessarily. So we put these constraints because they push another important piece of working in design
Mhm.
thinking, which is a bias for action. We just got to do stuff. We're not going to talk about it. We're just
Exactly.
going to do it, do it, do it. So like those
And
constraints can be helpful sometimes.
mhm.
Not
And,
always,
like,
but
even
sometimes.
on the financial aspect, like, I always thought, well, to make change, you need capital, you need money, which is true sometimes. But I'm sure you've heard of, like, the innovations and the
Mhm.
inventions made, I think it was India, but where they basically had this thing, this pill, where if you put muddy water into it, and then it starts crystallizing, and then all the sediments go down, and it becomes drinkable water.
Um,
That was done with very minimal financial capital initially. So even stuff like that, the lights in Africa, that was, I think they use electrolytes to do that. It's insane.
mhm. Yeah, it's amazing. Like it can catalyze such creativity. And would those people want like that are would the people who are developing these things want to have more financial resources
Hmm.
to do these things? I'm sure they would. Would they have had the same ideas? They might have. We don't know. But I think
Yeah.
it's not a must have for the resources. It's a nice to have, and people can do amazing things even without resources sometimes, and see challenges from a different perspective. I can tell you a story about a broken
Yes.
elevator that kind of illustrates this. So there was a building, and there was this building that had an elevator that was so slow, and the people that used this building kept complaining to the building owner, you need to fix the elevator because it goes so slow. So the building owner looked into it. It
Hmm.
was going to be thousands of dollars, and that building owner didn't have the money to fix the elevator. So looked at this from a different perspective. Is the problem that the elevator is slow? Maybe. But what if we could repurpose like the waiting time? So the building owner installed mirrors in the elevator waiting area.
Um,
Complaints went way down. Why? Because people are looking at themselves in the mirror and they don't realize
hmm.
that they're waiting. So it's a simple, like
Hmm.
it's pretty simple,
Hmm.
but Disney World does the same
Yep.
thing. I don't know if you've been to Disney World, but the sometimes the lines
Yep.
can be 2 hours long, even longer. But they engage
Hmm.
you throughout that waiting experience, so you don't even sometimes
Hmm. Hmm.
realize
Hmm.
that you're waiting in line. And they also have the peaks, right? Like the best moment. You walk in,
Yep.
amazing. You leave fireworks, amazing. So you're not going to
Hmm.
remember
Hmm.
like the
Absolutely, I love
valleys
that.
always.
Um, Oh, I like now 4,000 questions, but we don't probably have enough time. Last few questions, though. I know we've spoken about this before, specialist versus generalist. So, as a consultant, oftentimes we're more of a
Mhm.
generalist. You go to different industries, but you're a specialized person in that framework in design thinking, for example, versus an industry expert who knows everything there is to know about mining. To solve a problem, do you think it's just a specialist work or is it,
Mhm.
generalist work or both?
I think it's both. It's definitely both. And I'll go back to the snow globe example earlier. So so to build on your mining example, we absolutely need someone on the team who is an expert in mining. And let's say you're doing mining finance or something. You need mining, you need finance, then you need somebody who has an expertise in like design research, for example, or research. Like you need this diverse team across so many facets of diversity to do this well. There is a book called Range: The Power of Generalists, or like I'm gonna get the subtitle wrong, but it's called Range. I think it's called The Power of Generalists in a Specialized World, and it talks about like yes, needing both. So what I've found to be useful is the concept of a T-shaped person. So that's somebody that goes broad across different industries and different methods, and
Mm,
then can go deep in one thing. And it might be an industry, it might be a technology. In my case, it's what I get called on for mostly at work in terms of skills
mm,
is design thinking and storytelling. So
mm-hmm.
those are the things
Ooh,
that I
can
would go
I
deep
catch in
in.
storytelling? How do you become a better storyteller?
Practice, and there is an organization
Yep.
called Toastmasters that I'm a big fan of that I went to for several years. And they are an organization, a global not-for-profit organization that specializes in helping people develop communication and leadership
Mm-hmm.
skills. It's so great. So if anybody wants to practice speaking and
Mm,
storytelling, Toastmasters is amazing. And learning about the technical elements of storytelling. There are frameworks. And there's this book. I probably have it right behind me.
mm-hmm.
It's a big one. It's a big one. So
Ooh,
the
wow.
seven basic
Wow.
plots. Look how thick that is. Insane. So it basically breaks down different
Mm-hmm.
different types of stories, like rags to riches, the hero's journey. And once you can learn and even just internalize the structure of a story, then it's easier to put the pieces in place. And I also use, so you ask if I use design thinking in other parts of life. This is another one where I like to do prototyping. And I have some templates for myself that I fill out when I have to write a story for work usually. And I start filling it out and I say like, okay, like what are the emotions I want to evoke with this story? And then I start what's the scene, and developing some characters, and then I figure, okay, what's the story? And I'll get a team together and we'll write like 10 5-minute first drafts,
Mm,
and we're going to throw
mm,
away 8 of them. That's okay, because we spent just a few minutes on this, and then we're like, oh, we've got something here, we've got something here, let's put it together. And then we build it. I like to write the whole thing
mm,
out, and then I'll read it to someone. I'll call someone that's not involved in the project and say, I want to tell you about my project, and I'll read them the story, and I'll gauge their reaction, and I want their specific feedback on it. Like what parts evoked emotion, what parts were confusing, and that anyway,
yeah, love
that's
that.
how I like to structure
Um,
stories.
Ending it with a final in a minute. So in LinkedIn, I know you do these like really quick 1 minute videos of
Mhm,
just innovation, tips, tricks, all of
mhm,
that stuff. Can we finish this with
mhm.
one in a minute?
Absolutely.
Uh,
As in, like, you're
no,
gonna
I mean you
like
could
put a
you could
link
go
to
for
it.
it
You want me to
now,
tell
as
you
in
which
like
one?
say
Or
one now, or it doesn't have to be 1 minute. It could be whatever.
sure, I'll tell you about how might we. I'll tell you about how might we. Oh no, talked about how might we
Yeah.
questions already. What should I talk about in a minute? So maybe we
Yes.
put it in the show notes. Like, look me up on LinkedIn. I do publish these videos.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
INNO minute. So minute. Innovative ideas in about a minute. And I did like prototyping and building to think here. I've been talking about it for over a year. I haven't published one
Mm-hmm.
for over a year again. Like I put out about 40 of them when I started to do other things, but I would like to get back into them. But I was telling a friend, and he lives nearby, and we would go out for pizza sometimes for lunch, and he says, I'm only paying for pizza on Monday if you put out your first video. I'm like, oh gosh, okay. So like I wrote my script, and I didn't have a ring light, and I just like sat and I just recorded it, and I look at it now, I'm like, oh my gosh, like compared with the later ones when I was like, oh, maybe I should put subtitles, maybe I should have a light and a logo, like, but I just did it and like put out the content, and and then like thanks to people's feedback, I just
Mm-hmm.
iterated and started improving them. But um Okay, what's an in a minute that
Mhm.
I could tell you about? I
Let's
could tell you about
let's do that.
storyboarding. I like to talk about storyboarding. It is a form of light prototyping. So if you have an idea that you want to figure out how it works, that is not a physical product, it's like a system or a service, you can draw a 4-frame storyboard. And here's how you do it. You take a piece of paper, and ideally this is a physical activity, not a digital activity. You can digitize later. And you divide it into 4. One line down, one line across. You've got 4 frames. Frame 1, your user has a problem. Frame 4, your user's problem has been solved thanks to your idea. Frames 2 and 3 are how they solved it with your idea. It should be drawings, not words. There should be a user action in every frame. Step 1, 2, 3, 4. How did this user solve your problem? Or solve their problem, rather, using your idea. When you're doing this on a team and you have this idea that everyone's excited about, take 5 minutes and have everyone on the team draw a 4-frame storyboard of how this works, because guaranteed everybody sees it differently. And when you spend 5 minutes doing this, like literally 5 minutes, stick figures are to be encouraged. Just like you look at that and you say, you see it that way, then just draw it again with the learning. It takes another 5 minutes. And then once you have something that starts to make sense, that's when you use it to start planning your experiments. You list the assumptions that underlie the human behavior in there, and you use those assumptions to plan your
Ooh,
experiment. That
no,
is
I
storyboarding.
love
Were you
that. That's I'm
timing me?
like,
Was
oh
that a
my
minute?
god, that's incredible. I'm going to use that now all the time. That's incredible. Thank you for that one. Before we finish off, if people want to go into innovation but they don't have the experience for it, what is your advice to them?
um, Read books and try things. Like make your own prototypes, and there are some great courses that people can take: university courses, college courses, free online courses. If you search design thinking courses, there are so many of them. So if you want to like get from a design thinking perspective, but it's not just design thinking. I'm biased because that's my job. Not It's not my job to be biased. It's my job to be design thinking. So I mean, we all have biases, but there are all. So I would say get a little bit of education, because like it doesn't replace experience, but it shows to people hiring that you have a commitment to learning the skills that are required to do this work. And then getting involved with not-for-profits that might need help. Like you can volunteer and get involved with projects to run projects. Because when I'm looking to hire for our team, if I see like somebody has led an end-to-end innovation project, I don't like look that much at who it's with. I'm like, okay, what were the outcomes of this? Like, do you have these skills? So get involved with a not-for-profit, early stage startups that are still like defining and solving different challenges, all kinds of different ways for people to get involved and develop some of these skills. Or if people are already inside big companies or small companies or organizations, whatever, it could be the government, could be academia, wherever, there's probably a team that's already doing this work. You might have a design team, an innovation team. Figure out how you might be able to partner with them in your work. Bring them into your work, which will make it
Ooh, I
easier for
love
them to
that.
bring you into their
Books,
work.
try things in in your own company or nonprofits, courses. What are your top 2 books that you could share with us?
Top 2 books if you're in a big company: read Designing for Growth by Jean Litka. She is a professor at the Darden School of Business at the University of Virginia, and she takes you step by step how to do human-centered design in large organizations. So that's a great one. And a classic for design thinking and innovation is called Change by Design by Tim Brown. A couple of years ago, the 10th anniversary edition came out that's updated. And that is also full of stories and examples. So if you're
Amazing.
only going to
I
read 2 books,
absolutely
make it
love
those 2.
that. Had such a great conversation with you. If people want to reach out to you, they can reach out on LinkedIn. That's also where you'll get the Inno Minutes at INNO Minutes.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for such a great conversation, Luke. It was such a pleasure.